Hello and welcome back to War Thunder and welcome back to my tank reviews. And today we will have a look at the Marder 3, which is a rank 2 German battle rating 2.7 tank destroyer. And I want to begin this tank review with a little bit of history. In 1941, when Germany was actually done with France and, gave up the idea of invading England in an amphibious operation, Hitler turned his attention towards Russia. And when Germany attacked Russia, or the Soviet Union rather, the Soviet Union was caught by surprise or in a rather difficult time because Stalin, let's put it in very polite words, cleaned up his military, and so there were not a lot of experienced officers left when Germany attacked. And while the Russian T-34 and KV-1 tanks were a nasty surprise for the Germans, it didn't stop their initial advantage of superior tactics, experience, and also connection of Air Force and Army. Now, what has this to do with the Marder 3? Well, again, the tanks that the Russians had were technically superior. They had either thick or sloped armor, were better prepared for the Russian landscape and the conditions. And also the Germans found out that their Panzer IIIs and Panzer IVs couldn't take on the T-34s and KV-1s. Also, they found out that they had a lot of Panzer 38Ts, Czechoslovakian tanks, and they were rather useless in combat purposes, but they had very reliable chassis. And they were technically reliably, they had them in masses, they were already there. And also Germany captured a lot, and I mean a lot, of Russian 76.2 millimeter field artillery or dedicated anti-tank guns. And so the simple solution were to take off the Panzer 38 turret and just put on this big gun for this rather small vehicle. And to just put on a small gun shield, and that's it. That was the birth of the Marder 3. And the Marder 3 proved to be very cheap. They had access to it in masses. They had a lot of captured guns in their disposal. A lot of ammunition was actually produced in Germany because the captured ammunition, was not enough. And so this actually became a backbone until German military came up with other tanks such as the Panzer IV F2 with the long barrel 75mm gun, and also the Tigers and Panthers later on. But the Marder 3 stayed into service in the German army until the very last days of the war. And yeah, I think this is a very iconic tank, or tank destroyer rather, and so I thought it would be time to make a tank review on it. And I will again compare it to the Marder 3H. Now, let's begin with the tank review. Let's have a look at the armor. Well, again, the chassis is Panzer 38T chassis, 50mm, together with a lot of sloping here and there, and also additional tracks here and there. The side is rather thin with 15mm. Again, big road wheels. The upper casement is 16mm. It might stop machine gun bullets. Again, here this gun shield is just 11mm thick, but it might stop some machine gun bullets. But 50 cals go rather reliably through this gun shield. And also there are some holes in the armor where the gun is, and also this viewport for the gunner. And also it's open topped, so from behind and the side, the gunner together with the loader are rather exposed. So the armor is not very good. Now, what about the interior? We can see that we have 4 crew members, the driver together with the machine gunner, and this one is the first one to get replaced. Even if you lose your gunner or loader, this machine gunner replaces them, and then you don't have access to your machine gun anymore. You can't use it anymore. Then we can see that the gunner is a bit in a weird position. and also the loader sits here rather exposed. Then we can see that we have the big engine together with the massive fuel tanks for the size of the tank in the back of the vehicle. Then we have also the transmission in the front and a lot of ammunition scattered throughout the tank. So yeah, it's very likely that you die with the first shot if they penetrate the hull of the tank. So what about the mobility? And I want to begin with the mobility before I talk about the firepower, because the mobility overall is not bad. This 160 horsepower engine accelerates this 11.3 ton tank rather reliably and rather fast to 42 kilometers an hour, which is not bad. You know, there are a lot of tanks that don't have this mobility, but the reverse gear is both in arcade and realistic abysmal. So in arcade we have a 24.7 horsepower to ton ratio and a 14 horsepower to ton in realistic battles, so that's not bad. But again, your reverse gear is Panther-like, so it's not good. And this is a problem for when I talk about the tactics. So, what about the firepower? Well, again, it is actually a Russian field gun or anti-tank gun. And there were numerous guns that the Germans captured. One of them, which I just want to mention, was the CIS-3, which in the German soldier slang was called the Ratschbum. Why is that? Well, the Ratsch was the noise of the shell when impacting, and the boom was when the gun fired, and you could them hear relatively at the same time, therefore the name. And yeah, it is as I said, a converted Russian anti-tank or field artillery. It does have a limited traverse, you know, for let's say a few degrees to the right and a few degrees to the left, of like 5 to 6 degrees, so that's not a lot. But you have a rather okayish 6 degrees of gun depression, which is way more than the Marder 3H, which does have a better gun traverse. You know, the gun can traverse like 10 degrees if I remember correctly, but just has 2 degrees of gun depression. And the chassis and the casemate is rather the same. Now we have 30 shells, and I want to have a quick look, or a rather excessive look, at the ammunition. It is the Panzergranate 39 Rot. It features 135 millimeters of penetration, which is really good for battle rating 2.7. And let's stay a little bit with it, because we have 20 grams of high explosive mass, but the TNT equivalent is 34 grams, which is like 6 grams more than on the normal German 75 millimeter guns. Also, the fuse sensitivity is a hefty 25 millimeters. That means you will suffer a lot of overpenetrations, especially when you shoot the enemy in the side. Overpenetration just simply means you penetrate the tank, but the fuse doesn't go off because the armor you penetrated is not thick enough to activate the fuse, so you don't benefit from the high explosive damage. Yeah. Then we also have the Hochladungsgranate 38C, which feature 100 millimeters of penetration. And just keep that in mind, because we also have the Panzergranate 40, which features nearly 190 millimeters of penetration, which is huge for this battle rating. Also, the Sprenggranate 39 features 9 millimeters of penetration, but don't use it. In fact, the only 2 shells that you should use is the Stockstelle Panzergranate 39 Rot. It will, it is totally capable of dealing with any enemy that you will face. And even when you up-tier this vehicle to 4.0, let's say, you would still be able to deal with most enemies. The Hochladungsgranate also features penetration and also a lot of high explosive damage. You might have a look at my ammunition guides. And yeah, don't use the Panzergranate 40. You just have 30 shells, you can run through it rather quickly. Although there are 2 things. First of all, the long reload of 7.62 seconds, which is 1.4 seconds longer than the German 75mm Pack 43 with 6.2. So for this battle rating, this is a long reload. Keep that in mind. I will come back to this in a moment when I talk about the tactics. The second thing is the broken optics. You can see that the optic sits here and the gun sits here, and this tank has a historical gun sight. That means you have to aim a bit more to the left because the shell travels a bit on the right hand side of your gun view. This might be not such a big deal at longer ranges, but at short ranges it just can make the small difference. Overall, the gun is really powerful, but has, as I mentioned, a lot of drawbacks. You just simply have to aim with the entirety of the tank. So yeah, again, let's have a quick look at the Marder 3's H's ammunition. The Panzergranate 39 features more penetration, but not by much. It's around 12 millimeters, but it features less TNT equivalent, like a few grams less. But this makes the difference between not reliably one-shotting stuff and more reliably one-shotting enemy tanks. At least that's my experience. Then also, for a 0.3 battle rating higher tank, we feature the Hochladungsgranate 38B, which just has 80 millimeters of penetration. The APCR obviously having better penetration, nearly 200 millimeters at battle rating 3. That's insane. And for a low caliber, technically lower caliber shell, the Sprenggranate 34 offers technically 10% more penetration, so 10 millimeters instead of 9. So these are the strange things that I wanted to mention. Yeah, and that brings us to the tactic of the Marder 3 together with the Marder 3H, and that is stay a little bit more back. You can't take any hits. In fact, look for a position where you can just engage enemies in one direction, where you don't get flanked, and also, funnily enough, where you can go hull down. Now, why is that? Well, the upper casement is so thin that a lot of APHE shells will go right through and act as a simply solid shot, just damaging either your gun or one of the crew members, but doing no more damage than that. And, because the armor is so thin that the fuse just simply doesn't get activated. Unlike on your hull. And while your hull can technically provide you with better protection, it's so thick that every APHE shell that gets fired at you gets activated. Just keep that in mind. Yeah, and aim with the entirety of your tank. Don't go onto, hilly terrain. Try to stay on flat terrain. Be sure that you are covered by AAA from enemy aircraft attacks if possible. Don't go alone anywhere. You can be easily outplayed when somebody flanks you or immobilizes you. So yeah, also your long reload means you really need the support. Either you go into a platoon with somebody else, or you just hang yourselves on the tail of other random teammates. So I think that's it with the theory crafting. Let's have a look how this tank actually performs in battle. And here we can see that on Carpathian Mountains, I guess, we had a very nice battle so far, 7 kills, a few assists, and as you could see, I never was alone. I always was backed up by my team. They not just gave the enemy something else to shoot at, but also gave me supporting fire when I needed it, and so I could engage and disengage whenever it was possible. So yeah, that's it for this battle. Let's have a quick look at the post-battle result screens. And we can see that for 7 kills and 1 assist, 6 critical hits, I got 32,000 silver lines and 2,552 research points. But I'm not researching anything at its battle rating or tier, so yeah, I got a massive reduction. I just was 3rd in team, surprisingly enough, with 2,150 score points. But I think that's enough with arcade. Now let's hop into the realistic gameplay. And welcome back to Kursk. And my first shot that I show you actually kills somebody in a Tetrarch Mark 1. And then I also see one American tank going along the riverside, try to immobilize him. It's rather long range shooting. It's about 1 kilometer, and I actually hit his engine and the fuel tanks. They get set on fire, but sadly he went behind some trees, so I couldn't finish him off. Now, Kursk seems to be a rather nice map for this tank, as you have the big long-range gun. And Kursk, especially on this side of the map, is rather long-range. And here we can see one of the new Russian gas AAA tanks. It features a single 50 caliber machine gun that actually, especially at short ranges, is pretty dangerous for open-topped vehicles or vehicles with not enough frontal armor. It's around about 25 millimeters of penetration at point blank range, and there we can see a T-80, and I finish him off with the first shell. Now that's the beauty of the APHE shell when it works. Then we can see another gas tank, and I was very lucky that he just damaged my crew and my gun breech, and I first knock him out take him out of commission by taking out the gunner, and then kill also the driver. So that's the usage of the machine gun. And then I spotted something there, but I got shot from the side and it disables my cannon breech. That's rather unlucky, and it's a fast firing British tank. I try to shoot anyway, but the shell just simply disappears, and I try to repair. I also want to mark him with the machine gun for the rest of my team, but it simply still hammers me pretty hard. And down to 2 crew members. And then he kills me, but not before I get a crippling shot into him. So yeah, that just shows you the vulnerability of this tank. Then I actually use a backup because I was really interested in how this match goes. It also was the second or third battle that I ever played in realistic with this tank, so it was something new for me. I don't get Kursk that often when playing realistic battles. Now, as I mentioned, many people say that Kursk is the very best map that you can get for the Germans, as it matches the gun depression, and actually the Crusader Mark II bailed out, as it seems like. So that's actually my 4th kill. Now, I think Kursk truly comes in handy for the Germans, as it provides long range possibilities, and as I mentioned, the Marder really profits from this with its rather big gun, its vulnerability, and the problem is that you can't go into real hard cover. The only 2 possibilities with rather hard cover are the surrounding of the cap circle with the houses and buildings, and also the center of the map with the village. But the cap circle itself is completely open, and there are actually not even any kind of bushes or trees where you can hide in realistic. Sadly, however, Kursk is a pure realistic map. I would love to have this map in arcade, but it is not to be. And there you can see the actual top speed of 42 kilometers an hour. So you can change positions rather quickly. I look around. I really need to decap A. I really want to go in there. I don't want to lose this match. At this moment, it looks not that good. We lost over half of our score points, so we have to act rather fast. Now, I'm not so interested in spotting enemies. However, I can see them at this point, so I take a shot, but I miss. And by the time I accelerate again, which you can see here right now, it's not that bad. Somebody else in my team actually actually decapped and begins to cap. And I damaged the drag of an American LVT. But again, he is exactly behind a tree, so I have a changed location. And I get a kill assist. So, yeah, not the best result, but hey, at least we're still alive and we have now the cap circle. Then I begin to spot, and there you can see actually the historical gun view. You could see for a moment. Now let's talk a little bit where the Marder 3 sits in the German tech tree. It actually sits at second place, and the German tech tree has a very nice line of very unique tank destroyers. From rank 1 to rank 4 they are very unique because they have really big guns for their battle rating, but often, or all of them, are open topped, very vulnerable to enemy fire, and yeah, trade off massive firepower for the lack of protection. And there we can see that now Russian planes are incoming. We are at that stage of the game where a lot of people choose to take planes for their first or second respawn. And then I kill an enemy Crusader Mark II with one shot. Gladly he didn't finish me with his shot, as you could see. Yeah, okay, British tanks just have solid shots, so as long as he doesn't penetrate my hull and hits my ammunition, I'm pretty safe from getting one-shotted by everything with solid shots. And up the hill we go, and you can see that even there the mobility is not that bad. And you can see that together with a Panzerjäger 1 I'm kind of spearheading the advance towards the enemy's spawn points. Now I know that there are some bots of the enemies, so some bot tanks, and you know, very often their guns do no damage, but sometimes they get into a more aggressive state where they then actually shoot with proper ammunition. And then I see a flash and a dust cloud. I take aim and one shot, another T-80. But it was a little bit too late because this guy actually killed a Panzerjäger 1 before I could finish him. And this Panzerjäger 1 just fires into the dead enemy just to make sure. By the way, German tankers and anti-tank gunners made that very often, especially against Germans. Not just to get sure that the enemy tank was out of commission, but to burn it down, to bring the ammunition to explode, because at the later stages of the war Germany was in full retreat on all fronts, and so while the Allies, especially the Russians and the Americans, could recover their tanks and repair them, the Germans couldn't. And to deny the enemy to repair a damaged tank, which later on you had to fight again, the Germans just simply fired as long until the enemy tank burned down or the ammunition went off. This is actually why the Sherman, for example, got such a bad reputation. It was not a bad tank, in fact it was a pretty good tank, and there you can see me finishing the first spot off and shortly afterwards the second. It just was, you know, the Sherman was always in advance. It always attacked, and the Germans were very often in a defensive position when they featured their Tigers and Panthers and even the King Tigers. When the Germans attacked, for example in the Ardennes offensive, or Battle of the Bulge as it is commonly known, they also lost a lot of their tanks due to hidden anti-tank guns, also to the lack of fuel and to air attacks, but also to anti-tank guns. Even the mighty Panther, Tiger and King Tigers suffered from this. Okay, the King Tiger just from the side, but You know what I'm talking about. So, and here we are at the later stage of the game, and there is actually nothing to show off, so I skip a little bit. So, a few minutes later, and finally somebody has chosen to spawn again in a tank, and I just go through the front driving wheel without actually damaging the enemy. And before I can reload, he hides behind the bush again, so I have to relocate again. I get shot in the side, but it doesn't do any damage, so I assume that those are bot tanks. And indeed, we can see that they hammer me quite nicely. Well, if Gaijin has put them there for, securing the spawn, those tanks don't do a very good job. So the first shell just lets this first tank burn a little bit. I kill the second, a T-26 with the first shot. And I didn't spot the remaining one, but then he opens fire and gives his location away, and I get a double kill because that BT-5 burned down at the same time where I killed the T-26. So that was just a bit of additional bot bashing, so to speak, and that's it for this battle. So, and as we can see, for 10 kills, of which we had 4 bots and 4 assists, I got 27,000 silver lines and 2,600 research points. Yeah, that's quite a nice result for just one reserve vehicle. And 2,353 score points provided me with first place. That's it for this tank review and this video overall. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening. Let me know in the comment section if you have something else to talk about this tank, and give this video a like if you did, because it really helps me out. Subscribe if you want to see more, and see you on the battlefields of War Thunder.